fallen foul to poor business practice. By the end of their first period, Planxty had already left behind a legacy of music that had taken traditional Irish music to new and exotic places without ever disgracing the tradition itself. There were, of course, a few detractors who disapproved of musicians such as Liam O'Flynn joining a band of guitars, bouzouki's and mandolins.
When she got up and I lay down, said, "Lassie, are we able?" But me told her, "Yeah, fall the doodle da, diary fall the doodle dairy oh."
I think the only one who might have suffered that a little bit might have been Liam in the early days, and some of the more conservative elements of, say, the piping world and of the traditional music world might have thought it was a bad move for Liam to be playing with guitars and mandolins. But then, once the band recorded and once the band started playing, I mean, people like Seamus Ennis gave the band his blessing, and generally, the few critics, most of them came around. There still would be a few of them there, you know, but so what? I mean, we weren't making music for anybody except ourselves, and we were happy with it.
This was a sort of a new direction. You know, traditional musicians were unused to that sort of approach and so on. And as indeed I was myself, but I've always had a terrific musical curiosity, I suppose. But I also knew that the people involved very well and respected their music. And I remember we had actually one rule in the band: that if there was any one individual within the band who who really didn't want to do this, that, or the other, or whatever, that was respected, and there was no further argument about it. And that was to me, that was a terrifically important thing, you know.
Yeah.
Ireland in the 60s was still like the 50s everywhere else, you know. So it's almost kind of like the 70s in Ireland in the traditional music world is where people started breaking the mold, and they attracted young people to listening to traditional music. And it was very much they were very much a young people's band. And I suppose, like, whenever that's the case, the parents are always going to be giving out about it, you know. And it's probably a great sign that they were doing something innovative.
I mean, I've always had a fondness for acoustic instruments, and it really was just, you know, what they managed, the level of dynamic they managed to achieve with, you know, just kind of 4 acoustic instruments, you know, and, you know, layered up overdubs and stuff. But you know, they could really rock out with four acoustic instruments on something like the 42-pound Czech, you know, which I still kind of play quite regularly in DJ sets, and then just beautiful interpretations of you know, songs that I guess were familiar to me, like Legs Upon the Train and Cliffs of Dooneen. And you know, initially I kind of saw similarities to other stuff that I was listening to, like, you know, just the kind of Lego brick kind of layered approach to you know, just carefully layering up tone and textures, and like in stuff like Kraftwerk even, you know. I mean, I really saw kind of similarities to people like Kraftwerk and Stereolab and Yola Tango.
We certainly felt that sense of adventure, and we knew from our audiences they were feeling that sense of adventure, and that's, you know, God, that's so fundamental in any band's success, and when it means something new is happening, something exciting, and that excites people, you know.
My money here's no good if it weren't for the alligators. I'd sleep out in the woods.
The song I chose to play is The Lakes Upon the Train, and it's from the album Cold Blow on the Rainy Night. And the reason why I liked it the first time I heard it is because Christy Moore's vocal on it really just, something about it really struck me. And like all Planxty songs, it just sounded really honest. And it's a very nice kind of specific tale about a guy who meets a girl near New Orleans and falls in love with her, but then he can't marry her because she's got a love who's far away.
And would you draw any parallels between the spirit of the music, between the spirit of the music that you're making nowadays and that they were making in the 60s and 70s?
Well, I mean, the first thing that really struck me about it was just how honest it sounded, and and I saw a live video of them playing, and just when you see them playing the songs, it just really strikes you that they mean every word. Even though these are folk songs that have been passed down through generations, they're just in the song, like. And I think the music that we would make in the Rednecks or whatever, it would always be about just striving to project the music as well as we can and just come across as like honest. So even though it's a different style of music, I think it could be seen as being quite similar in that way.
To the health of my Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain.
My dad and my uncle's a big piper, and he's always, used to come over here a lot playing with people like Paddy Keenan and everyone. And just I was about growing up with it really, a lot of that music. So, but when I first heard them, it wasn't like the stuff my grandma played, it was just had this, it was like hippies had got hold of Irish music, and they obviously smoked, or maybe they didn't, but it felt, it was about, when I really got into about 13, and I just poured over the first 2 albums, Cold Blow and Planxty Planxty. It's just like, this is amazing, and just even discovering people like you, and McCall, and everyone, via them, I got into like those different things, and, they did really blow my head off. It was like I was checking out the Ramones and punk and things like that, but also really getting into them,
But just, I mean, like I said, the Beatles are traditional music. They did it all. They had it all.
Rolling in the night, we'll go no more roving, let the moon shine so bright. We'll go no more roving. She took the bed in both her hands and she...
Well, I have to say that for the first 18 months of Planxty, the first 2 years of Planxty, was maybe some of the most exciting times, particularly when the band was taking off, because it was like there was a generation of people being turned on to this music that we were playing, and were discovering their roots and their heritage and their Irishness the same way as I did with the Clancy Brothers. It was just a huge turn on, and to be part of that and to be up on stage providing that was a tremendous buzz. Yeah. If I remember correctly, there were no record companies interested, and it was Phil Coulter who became interested, and Phil Coulter recorded the band.
Produced your first 3 albums?
Yeah, and he sold them on, and he exploited them.
Really?
Yeah.
So there was, Planxty, as great as you were, you didn't have the business and things stuff in the early days?
No, not at all.
Was that the time? Was that the 70s? Was that the nature of the climate and the...
Well, I think the scene we emerged from didn't have any business acumen in it. It was the folk scene, basically. It was the ballad scene. There weren't business people involved in it. So we didn't have any knowledge of all that. But that said, none of the record companies, be it the independents or the nationals or internationals, were interested initially. It was only when Coulter recorded us that they became interested.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to make it very clear, I am immensely proud of what I did with Planxty. And I think that at that time it was something very, very special, and continues to be something very, very special. In point of fact, with my hand on my heart, I would say that I have heard nothing since Planxty that gives me the same excitement. I've heard nothing that moves the goalposts the way Planxty did. I've heard nothing that has the same dynamic as Planxty, but nothing that has the same energy, that same originality, that same fusion of things. I was very proud to have been part of it, and I still sign off for that when I look back on my 35 years in the music business. That's one of the things that gives me great, great pleasure, and I still play the Planxty albums. Now, whatever about the other stuff, that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I don't feel that I have in any way acted in bad faith with Planxty. I still have a huge respect for all of the guys and for their music. And I wouldn't want to be perceived as somebody who exploited that situation, who didn't care about it, or who was cavalier about it. I was none of those things, and it's still very important to me.
The first 3 albums are owned by Shanachie Records, and they put them out in a really scrubby way with the wrong, pictures that were taken later on earlier albums. I hate that. And misprints, the West Coast of Clare, C-L-A-I-R-E.
Well, basically there's things going on now with Planxty material that really pisses me off. You know, anybody who wants to seems to be able to get hold of those old Planxty tracks and put them out on any fucking old crap.